New York Mets master plan is being executed. David Stearns strikes for the first time 6 days and about 4 hours before the trade deadline, acquiring Gregory Soto from the Baltimore Orioles, another critical arm, a lefty arm, as Met fans are stoked. They believe that this is the beginning of David Stearns' master plan for the trade deadline in 2025. Plenty of bullpen arms, plenty of arms coming, and we're going to talk about it only here on New York Met Digest. I'm your host today, Mike Duda. We'll talk Gregory Soto and this deal, but first we got to talk subscribers, and that being that 68.9% of you that watch these videos aren't one. So please do me a favor, just favor here on Mets Digest, and hit that free subscribe button. That way we can bring content to you about the amazing, and of course about the New York Mets here at the trade deadline. So without further ado, let's dive right into this deal. Here it is. The New York Mets got left-handed pitcher Gregory Soto from the Baltimore Orioles in exchange for Wellington Arcina and Cameron Foster. This is confirmed by John Heyman, Andy Martino of SNY, basically everyone, and it became official as of 1:49 p.m. Eastern Standard Time today. So the New York Mets have acquired their guy, the second left-handed pitcher in this bullpen, with, of course, Danny Young out for the entire season. Soto and Raley are going to be the two lefties going forward. So with it, let's turn it over to the experts. We're going to hear from Martino himself, in addition to John Flanagan of SNY. They say, quote, "This marks the third time in Soto's career that he's been traded. He first broke into the league with the Tigers, but after 4 seasons, he was shipped off to the Phillies, whom he spent a year and a half with before they traded him to Baltimore ahead of the 2023 deadline." So let's go back to some David Stearns quotes that we've seen before. We've seen this as we debriefed a big press conference that Stearns had at the beginning of the week. He said a couple of things, including, quote, "We've been hit with injuries in the pitching staff. I think specifically the bullpen, and so we will be active there. I think providing our group some reinforcements in the bullpen would be great." And of course, he went ahead and did that by getting the man on your screen in Gregory Soto. So with that, let's go over some trade grades. These are the best trade grades that we can see. There are so many of them, but we're going to start off with the one on your screen. This is from both Fansided and the New York Times, who give the Mets an A- in this deal and the Orioles a B. We're going to go over all of these guys in depth: Soto, Arcina, and Foster. But for now, let's look at these grades. As for clutch points, they gave the Mets a B+ and the Orioles a C+. Now, ESPN was a lot less generous, but you have to take into account, I know I might be biased saying this as a Met fan, talking about bias, but I do believe that ESPN is biased against the Mets. We did a whole video on that, about how the Sunday night crew doesn't like the Mets, how there was a sold-out crowd at Citi Field, and they said, oh, everyone's here to watch the Dodgers. So I'm not taking this one fully to heart, from Bradford Doolittle and David Schoenfield, who said the Mets get a C+ and the O's get a B-. As for Yahoo Sports, they also went in favor of the O's, giving them a B and the Mets a B-. But overall, I'm a big fan of this trade. I think this was a really, really good trade for David Stearns, and this is exactly what David Stearns does. He went out, he didn't get the biggest name. There are bigger names out there in the bullpen market right now. There's your David Bednars, there's your Johan Durans, Emmanuel Clase has been rumored to be going elsewhere. So you have plenty of big names, even in the bullpen, in addition to, of course, the rotation. And Stearns went out and got a guy that you wouldn't expect. He wasn't even the biggest name from the Orioles. Felix Bautista is obviously the biggest name from the O's. And he went out and got Gregory Soto, the second biggest name in Baltimore, an under-the-radar name, but honestly, a gem of a player. Here are his career numbers. I know the ERA is not good on the career side, but I'm more focusing here in 2025. A 3.96 ERA. The strikeout to 9 and the walks are not great. He walks a lot of batters, typical with Jeremy Hefner. It's not going to get much better with Hefner as the pitching coach. I love Hef, don't get me wrong. I think this Met lab in the pitching side is definitely a real thing, but Hefner is somebody who allows his pitchers to walk a lot of batters, so this will not get better with Soto, but 11 strikeouts to 9 is pretty solid. Of course, with a lot of walks given up, the whip is going to be high, and that ERA is solid. That ERA is below a 4, and there are some better statistics to go over, such as his ERA month by month. He had a phenomenal March. Granted, March is a very, very short month for baseball. He only pitched in 2 games, but did not give up an earned run. Struggled in April at a 5.40 ERA, brought it down in May, 3.52, and then had a stellar June at 1.64 3.34, and his ERA now is a little bit inflated at 7.11 in the month of July. So I think Stearns did the right thing here. Stearns saw a guy who has great stuff. We'll take a look at the advanced metrics in just a little bit, who had a phenomenal month of June and a solid month of May as well. There were about 2 months there where he was pretty dominant with Baltimore. And so he's like, hey, look at this guy. Look what he can put up here in 2025. This was less than a month ago that he was putting up these great statistics. And now that he's starting to struggle in July, his value is a lot lower. So the Mets bought low, and the potential is really, really high with Gregory Soto. I like that a lot. And as we talk about said potential, look at the advanced metrics. Expected ERA is far lower than his actual ERA. That's a 3.34 expected ERA. When we look at his current ERA, it's a 3.96. So a substantial difference, over a half ERA point different between his expected ERA and his current ERA. This, of course, takes into account factors like luck. And as for luck, you play in Baltimore where the team is just not as good. I know they're greatly below expectations. I'm very surprised with how the Orioles are not doing well this year, but they've been a struggling team. And with that, when you're a pitcher on a struggling team, your luck is likely not going to be as great. Now Soto goes from a bottom team in the American League East to the team that is atop the National League East. Let's go. We are finally atop the Phillies. That is awesome. So you go from a team last in the AL East to a team that is first in the NL East. Your luck is going to get better, and hopefully that ERA is going to come down as a result. He has great fastball velocity, avoids the barrel at a really, really solid rate, gets a lot of strikeouts, gets a lot of whiffs. The only problem with him, like we've gone over, is that he's in the 11th percentile in walk percentage. He walks 11.3% of his batters, which is really, really bad. And here in 2025, he has a 4.5 walks per nine that has been as high as 5.7 in one of his 2 All-Star seasons, and a career 4.7 walks per nine. So he's actually worse this year. He's better this year in terms of the walks than he has been in his career. That's really the only flaw that I see right now with Gregory Soto. Let's see what he's going to throw at batters. He's got a sinker, slider, four-seamer, a sweeper. He doesn't really go to that sweeper, doesn't really go to the split finger, and barely goes to that four-seamer. So he's likely going to be running a sinker-slider combo. And left-handers with a slider is absolutely incredible. And speaking of left-handers, let's look at the opponent OPS between lefties and righties against Soto. Soto, of course, throws from the left side. The opponent OPS from right-handed hitters is a 726. That is bad for a pitcher. As for lefties, 547 OPS against. That is incredible. That means this guy is going to be a great use, not really as a setup man. I still like Brooks Raley right now as that setup man, even though he's one of your 2 lefties that hopefully you can move to a 7th inning man if you go out and get a guy who could really be a true setup man for Edwin Diaz there in the 8th. I think Soto is going to be amazing to bring in those situations against the left-handed batters because he's so good in left-on-left situations. But of course, this was a trade, so let's go over who we gave up. We gave up Wellington Arancina, who is the number 19 prospect in the Mets system, and as of the time that I'm recording this, MLB.com has updated his prospect outlook and has him also as the number 19 prospect over there in Baltimore. 20 years old, 6'3", 180, a right-handed pitcher currently in single A, double right, with an estimated time of coming to the big leagues of 2028. 50 on the curveball, 60 fastball, slider 55, cutter 60, change 40, control 40 for an overall 40 prospect. His actual pitches themselves look really solid, but he just can't control it, and therefore overall him as a prospect is a little bit lower than you might have looked. But let's turn it to MLB.com, who has the prospect outlook here on Arancina. They say, quote, a native of the Dominican Republic, Arancina signed for only $70,000 as part of the Mets 2022 international class that also brought in infielder Jesus Baez. Baez is a top 10 prospect right now in the Mets system. He's been a project on the bump ever since, even walking 20.2% of his batters faced in 2024. That is pathetic. His first stateside campaign. But that project was rounding into terrific form in the Florida State League this summer, as Arancina flipped between starting and relieving and racking up innings in his age 20 season when he was sent to the Orioles as part of the return for Gregory Soto near the trade deadline. That, of course, occurred mere hours ago. So, a very, very poor 2024 since coming stateside for Arancina, but he looked solid this year, and we're going to see that with the other prospect that the Mets dealt in this Soto deal. But to continue with Arancina, MLB.com says, quote, standing at 6'3", the right-hander has built up velocity as he's physically matured, and he now brings serious heat to the mound, sitting 96 to 99 miles an hour with his four-seam fastball and topping out at 101 in 2025. The movement profile doesn't quite pop, but while the heater has been more touchable than the velo would indicate, it's still generally weak contact. That's good because even when you throw the ball really hard, these are professional hitters. They're going to hit the ball, so it's good that he's producing weak contact in terms of if you're looking out for Arancina and what the Mets formerly had. To continue with the quote, the star of the show is arguably Arancina's razor-sharp 92 to 94 mile an hour cutter. It comes with plenty of heat itself, but moves 6 more inches to the glove side than the four-seamer and comes with some drop, often leading batters befuddled. That's a fun word. He has the makings of an upper 80s slider with good depth too, giving him another whiff-heavy option and a mid-80s curveball that isn't at the same level. Arancina has barely thrown his 92 to 95 changeup in 2025 because it doesn't offer as much of a change in speeds. And to close it all out, they say, quote, entering late July, Arancina had cut his walk rate down to 13.2% with single-A Port St. Lucie, but he still has the making of a pitcher trying to blow his stuff past batters. Even if he has to stick in relief, the fastball-cutter combination could be stellar in the back of an MLB bullpen. Stellar. So the Mets did give up a solid prospect here, but from what I was hearing about all that walk rate, I don't love it, as here is the stats overall, and you see how many walks he had in 2024. 42 walks in 17 games and just 40 and two-thirds. That is well above a 9 walks per 9, which is putrid, absolutely putrid. We were talking about how Soto walks a lot of batters at a 4.7 career walks per 9. This guy was nearly 10. So definitely a ton of walks, but he's got some good raw stuff, and that was the bigger prospect that the Mets gave up, as here is the other one in Foster. Foster, of course, has had more experience. He's reached up to AAA this year and has a sub-3 ERA over the course of his minor league season here in 2025. He's definitely going to be in the pros quicker than Arancina. In fact, the O's might call up Foster sooner rather than later because rumors are saying that they are just going to be starting to sell. They started it with Soto, and now they're going to start getting rid of basically all of their pieces, and therefore they're not going to have a lot of guys even at the major league roster, and Foster might quickly be an MLB pitcher. But overall, I don't mind giving up either of these prospects. Yes, you gave up a top 20 prospect, but he was the number 19 in the system, and you got a solid return package in, of course, Gregory Soto. Now, I like this tweet. I know it's not that popular and it's not from the greatest source, so to speak, but I like the way he lays out the bullpen. The first up is the long reliever, Jose Butto. That makes sense, a former starter who goes a lot of innings. You got Huasco Brazoban, Ryan Stanek, Brooks Raley, and now Gregory Soto as your middle relievers. One setup man in Reed Garrett. I like Brooks Raley being the setup man instead of Garrett, but that is what it is. Another setup man is really the hope right now for the New York Mets with Edwin Diaz as the closer. And it's no offense to guys like Chris Davinsky or even Rico Garcia, who I personally really like, but that gets your Rico Garcias and your Chris Davinskys out of a World Series contending bullpen. So that is definitely a good sign overall. Let's return to that SNY article quickly before we wrap up today, as Flanagan and Martino say, quote, certainly a good start for David Stearns, but more relief help is expected to be on the way, and that is absolutely the case. As an update here is after getting Gregory Soto in that trade, the Mets are still eyeing multiple additions to their bullpen. A league source tells Will Salmon of The Athletic. In fact, that is multiple league sources. So the Mets are definitely not done after getting their first piece in Gregory Soto, which makes me as a Met fan super, super stoked. So let me know down below, did we give up too much? Did we get the right first piece in Gregory Soto? I'm definitely a fan of this trade. It gets a thumbs up from me for David Stearns, but let me know, what else do we need? Did we do right? Plenty, and I mean plenty of trade deadline coverage is coming. All the deals that the Mets make, stay tuned here on Mets Digest Forum. Stay tuned for all the rumors. Everything that we are hearing, we're going to talk about, myself and Adam. plenty to come in the week to come, so stay tuned for all of it. Thank you so much as always for watching. Unfortunately, that's all the time I have for you in today's video. Again, drop your comments, let me know what you think of Soto and this deal, and future deals that David Stearns might go out and get. And of course, let's go Mets.